Welcome to United by Trucks. We are here with Corey Ivey. So yesterday I was Dandridge, Tennessee, and you guys probably know this truck. This is Lemon Twist. This truck is super cool, and Corey's here to tell us all about it. So thanks for going on camera and telling us a little bit about your truck.
No problem at all.
I want to know how you ended up with this truck. What was your reasoning for wanting to buy a 6772, and how did you end up with it?
Got into autocrossing with one of my good buddies, Tim Strange. He has a Camaro, and I enjoyed it. Autocrossed with a bunch of friends, but probably the big influencer was Kevin Baps. He had a blue patented.
I remember it well. Twisted
C10.
Intro Vistas.
Yeah, got to ride with him, autocross with him a bunch. He was the big kicker, so we started looking. Me and Dad and Mom, we rode around from Georgia, Kentucky, a bunch of different states looking. Sure. Everything was either rotten and $15,000, $20,000 or something, and we found this one in South Carolina. It was just been painted, still 6-lug, no bed floor, no interior.
So just sort of a shell of a truck, but had a good killer foundation, obviously.
Oh yeah.
It was already painted?
Already painted. The guy we bought it from owned a body shop. He was painting it for himself to build as a daily driver, and had 2 daughters that was into dirt track go-kart racing.
Yeah.
And he needed money to help support them, and he needed an extra bay in the garage for a new rotisserie. And so we made a deal, and when I showed Dad the pictures, he said, "That's a long bed." I said, "No, it ain't." He said, "That's a long bed." So we got up there, and luckily it wasn't a long bed.
Yeah, right.
We come to an agreement, and we brought it back home and started working on it from there.
That's awesome. It's been through a couple of phases, and I think anybody who knows this truck has seen it in a couple of different phases. But what did the first phase look like for this truck?
We took the stock suspension out, converted it to a 5-lug with Hotchkiss TVS, their total vehicle system, coils and shocks. We went with 20s the first go around. I did 2010.5s up front and 2012s in the rear.
Yeah.
Love the look, but then over time, there just wasn't a lot of tires available to autocross with. And I wanted to do both, be able to cruise with it, autocross, and do kind of everything.
Yeah.
Called Ford's line and upgraded to a set of 11.5s and 1812s.
Upgrade, right?
Yeah.
Most people want to go from 18s to 20s, but like you said, this is a dual purpose truck. It's not just to go to church or to go to town,
right, but
you also want to run it on the track.
And you know, going from a 20, what a lot of people don't think, it was a 28.5 overall diameter tire, where these are 25.9. Yeah. So I was already dropping roughly 1.5 inches in ride height,
right, just
with a tire. And then when we changed suspension later to no limit, you know, that allowed us to lower it a little bit more.
Would you call that phase 2?
Phase 2. Originally, when I heard No Limit was moving to Dandridge, I'm like, surely it's not Dandridge, Tennessee. But it was. Little old me, I got the courage, and I went down to No Limit, got to talking to Rob, and we're standing here where me and Rob had a conversation about possibly building a set of trailing arms, and I remember being pretty nervous. I mean, you read about Rob McGregor and hear about him, you know, and you know, I'm just a guy in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I'll make it for another application, and the trailing arms are laying there, and so I just remember kind of being dumbfounded and being like, what? He's considering building a set for my truck, you know. So.
Yeah, and the fact that he was right here in your hometown.
Yeah,
in Dandridge.
15 minutes from my house. At the time, I had the Hotchkiss stuff, and I was really just looking for a set of trailing arms with monster balls or something like Porterbuilt made. Yeah. I said, "Do you make anything?" He said, "No." He said, "Actually, I don't." He said, "I do for some other applications, but I'd be interested in making a set." So that was where the trailing arm kit was developed. Sure. I was the guinea pig for it. Yeah, and I'll say, you probably don't know this, but the first time I was introduced to this truck was the build thread. I think Rob started the build thread on the suspension kit on the 6772 Chevy Forum. So that's where I first learned about this truck. And I remember I've got a note in my phone that actually has that same kit on it, because I was, you know, at the time dreaming about building a truck like this that had that kind of kit on it. So that's how I first got to know about this truck. If you guys have not seen this truck in person at a show or at a racing event, you definitely want to check this truck out. And the reason I say that is it's not on a full chassis. No. It's still got a lot of some of the creature comforts, and you're still extremely competitive. Until Jesse. Would you say, Jesse? Jesse's behind the camera. Would you say he's competitive?
So let's talk a little bit about the racing. I mean, we'll jump back to phase 3 here in just a minute because I know there's phase 3 there. But why do you want to run this truck on the track? Why do you want to do autocross? What's the drive for doing that?
I guess it's multiple things. For one, it's fun, you know. But a lot of the autocross guys, I guess we're a close knit group. It's just a bunch of friends hanging out, cool cars, eating. Just talking, just having a good time. Yeah. That's probably the best part of it. Autocross and being competitive with friends, you know, Danny Cartwright, Matt Keener, Jesse, Bill Holt, you know, a bunch of those guys. It's just a blast to be friendly, competitive, you know, and every year to see if you can beat that person or go a little bit faster.
Yeah. Not out of malice, but just out of pure friendly competition.
Yeah, and if you upstep this guy, well then you better be watching because he's about to do it to you. Yeah. And then this whole thing's been a father-son thing and built it with my dad and there's a lot of memories. I proposed to my wife in it and me and Dad's built it, and the wood bed that's in the back is actually from one of her papa's old cherry trees he cut down.
Oh, very cool.
She said he was a Ford man. He would roll over in his grave if he knew it. But
I can't think of a better truck for it to be in, you know, Ford man or not.
I said, I'll put a Ford stamp on the bottom if you want me to, just not on the top. Yeah.
But tell us a little bit about phase 3. How did it get to where it is now? And I'd like to talk a little bit about how Jesse got involved with it, because, you know, you talk a lot about how it was a father and son build, but there's, you know, certain components that you outsourced essentially.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about this thing right here.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on here?
Yeah, so I'll introduce you to Lemon Twist. This is Corey's truck. I guess the history between me and Corey is that whenever I built my yellow truck 5 or 6 years ago, the first LS Fest that I ever went to, I spotted this truck in the parking lot, and I spotted Corey and Chuck, his dad. Yeah. They were both outside, Southern gentlemen, ready to introduce themselves to me, a fellow truck enthusiast, and we've been friends ever since. Yeah, he's a very good dude, and throughout the years has come to trust us to help him with little projects. This came here, no joke, for vintage air install and a transmission cooler. He's really allowed us to go further. We rewired this truck this last winter, put a new Holley EFI system on it, just try to refine this truck. And huge props to Corey and Chuck. They built this truck themselves. Every bit of this truck they did themselves. But you know, after using it now for 6 or 7 years, you know, it was kind of time to, okay, we need to get air installed in this. Let's go back and look at the wiring. They had some drivability issues with the EFI system, so that's where some of those upgrades came along. And so Corey always had this thing where he had automatic transmissions in it, overheating issues with the transmission because of, you know, what he's doing with it, and then gearing restraints, you know, so really needing to change out final drive ratio to get it just right. So he had all these kind of workarounds or challenges with autocrossing or, you know, using an automatic transmission. So what we're doing now is installing one of these Bowler Race Prep T56 Magnums, and this is one that has the Corvette ZR1 close ratio gear set in it.
I was always wanting to go lower and wanting to go wider. I love the look of a 335. And, you know, a bunch of guys run them, and I'm like, there's no way. You know, we kept cutting, kept trimming, and kept wanting to go lower. I was actually running a Viking Warrior, which came with Rob's suspension. I was talking to a bunch of the guys at UMI, and they're like, oh, you need to go with the Crusader. I'm like, well, what's that? You know, and so they said that's their autocross prepped coilover. So I got to talking to Chris and a bunch of the guys at Viking and ended up selling those Warriors and went with those. And of course with the new tire and wheel setup and the new Crusaders, we adjusted them a little bit more and got the truck a little bit lower and cut a little bit more, changed the seats a few times. I actually talked my dad out of the seats in his Camaro that sat a lot better than the ones I had at the time. But it's just been a constant change, and like you said, creature comforts. You know, we got a little center console you can put a drink in, store stuff. But
tilt column, radio, CD player.
Now, thanks to Jesse, I have heat and air, which I drove for 5 or 6 years. No heater core, no air. We'd be at LS Fest, which is where I met Jesse 5, 6 years ago or something like that. And me and Dad were leaving LS Fest, and I keep a couple microfibers to wipe bugs and stuff off, and it was pouring down the rain. We were leaving. and I'd have to wipe the window, drive a little bit, wipe the window, drive a little bit.
That's my whole trip to Texas last year.
Yeah. You see vehicles or builds and stuff and you think, oh, they got a lot of money. Well, no, you just got to go through stages. They just don't see those stages, I guess.
Let's just kind of hit the highlights here. So current setup, suspension and wheels and tires.
I have Rob's older generation wide ride independent front suspension. We've upgraded to the Delrin bushings. I still have his, I think it's the ZG spindle. Jesse and a lot of them's running that new, I think, ATX spindle now. Speedtech makes. I originally had my dad's 69 Camaro 12 bolt in the truck when we started. And we run it for a couple years, seen a bunch of guys at Charlotte that the axle would just shear off. The vehicle would go this way and the wheel would go that way. So saved up, put a Mosier floater in. We've re-geared a couple times since then. I still have the trailing arm set up in the back.
Which I love on these trucks. I don't know how well it fits in the autocross scenario. It seems like it's fitting pretty well. But
it's worked pretty good, and one of the fastest guys we run with is Danny Cartwright. And he still runs trailing arms, and he beats half the vets, and we're always chasing him. So, I mean, they work. And like Dad always says, NASCAR run it for years.
That's true.
It worked for them. So, I mean.
Yeah, that's true. Tell us a little bit about the wheel and tire setup.
I have 335, 3018 squared. I could have fit an 1812, but me and Dad tried to be a little conservative on the front. We were a little leery that I might not fit. It's Forge Line GA3Rs. I used to be a dealer for Forge Line in my older profession when I worked for my family. We went with their race setup to get a little bit lighter inner barrel, you know, and they've got a race competition cap, which I love the look of it. So
my favorite part about them is, we were talking about this earlier today. I actually didn't realize this, and I filmed this truck a little bit already at Jesse's, and I still didn't realize this, but the hoop is a different color than the center.
It's a satin bronze hoop and a satin black center. I got the ideal from the 48-hour Camaro. Since it was close, it was a butternut color. But when I was talking to Mark, he said, I would suggest doing a satin black center just so brake dust doesn't attract to it as much as the matte black like they run. Okay. So we stayed with the same band since I loved it, and just went with the satin black, and I'm glad that I took his advice.
Yeah, I like it. Okay, so moving up from wheel and tires, from suspension, let's talk about the drivetrain. Obviously, that is a critical component to having a truck that you're going to be competitive with. So tell us a little bit about that.
Before we got the truck, my dad had bought a 6.0 off of one of our buddies, Tim, the one I started autocrossing with, sitting in the garage and in hopes of something to put it in one day. And this truck actually had some built small block race engine in it, and the guy wanted like $2,500. We're like, no, we got to motor it to house. Dad and one of our friends, they stripped through the factory harness to make it run, put it in the truck. We got to going. Met Brandon Loy at Lethal Performance and took it down there, and he helped go through the wiring a little bit more, clean it up a little bit, just to work some bugs out and some different stuff, just to make the truck more drivable. Brandon also did a Texas Speed Cam. That was probably the first upgrade after a year or two to get a little bit more power. Was running a junkyard 4L70. Ran it for 3 or 4 years. And
this is where it gets good, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you don't have an automatic transmission in this truck anymore. So let's talk about that progression from the junkyard 4L70 to where you are now.
That one was great, 3 or 4 years. Burned it up. We were running Smoky Stadium. The track we were on needed first and second gear. And I bumped second, and it wouldn't go to second. And I'm like, what's going on? And so we drove it out the road, and we went over to Brandon's, and he plugged it in, and it was commanding second, but it wasn't going. And once I got so many RPMs, it would shift on into third gear.
Oh, so it just completely bypassed second altogether.
So after that, we pulled it. Had a buddy that we autocross with. He built one that he had at his shop with Sonic's closer ratio gears, because the initial first gear was 306, and Sonic's makes a 284. It was just too much of a drastic difference between first and second for what we do. So he upgraded that, did a few different better internals. I ran it for a year, and it ran great. I mean, the whole back was a lot better, engine braking, felt great autocrossing. We run a power steering cooler and a transmission cooler, but burnt that one up real quick. It ran way better than the initial one, but I burned it up real quick. I was actually, when I took it to Jesse's, we were upgrading to a Bowler transmission cooler with their dual fans and everything, and well, it was too late. I guess I burned it up before that. So after that, I'm like, well, I just can't afford to keep going automatic. So Jesse gave me the option. Okay, you're either going to go 4L80 built, or you're going to have to go with a manual. They're just tougher. They're just better for what we do.
Yeah.
One of the issues I'd had for a long time was not having engine braking in second gear for bigger tracks.
Yep.
We were always trying to figure that out, figure out a way to program it in the computer. And so finally I broke down and I went with 3 pedals. So now I've got a Bowler race prepped 6-speed with the 229 first gear, and it's really, really nice.
It's a lot of fun.
It's like butter. And
I'm having fun in the passenger seat riding in this thing.
Yeah.
We'll show you some footage of that here in just a minute, but it is, it just seems like it's a lot more fun. And Jesse obviously has, you know, he's rubbing off like he does on everybody. He makes me want something with a Bowler 6-speed in it.
He's very good at that.
Yeah, he is good at that. But it seems like the truck is just so much more alive. And like I said, I've never even driven it. I'm just riding in the passenger seat, but it just seems, you know.
Even like with the Camaro rear end we started with, we had a 410 gear, and then when we went with the floater, we went with a 370.
Yeah.
So then the truck kind of, you know, calmed down a little bit. Well, then when we put the manual in, all of a sudden some of that pep came back. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot more fun to drive.
Well, speaking of driving it, how about we go take a drive in it?
Sure.
All right,
good.
let's do it. All right, Corey, so we are taking a ride in Lemon Twist, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh man. Well, we've talked a lot about suspension. We talked a lot about drivetrain, wheels and tires. I mean, we've really dissected this truck, but we haven't really gotten into what you want to do to it going forward. So what kind of plans do you have for this truck going forward?
My first big immediate thing, trying to save up to, I love my 6.0, but the weight of it makes it hard to be competitive with a lot of the guys running LS3s, LS7s.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, Jesse likes to make my wife mad. So
How does he do that?
he likes to entice me to spend money.
Oh yeah, he's good at that.
Or work harder, I guess I should say, to put back more money. But Don Hardy builds a 418, and that would up my horsepower by roughly a little over 100 horsepower, and I would lose roughly 100 pounds on the front end of the truck. So
Oh wow, that's significant.
that would help me in 2 different aspects of autocross. And then I'd like to keep this motor for maybe another build of my dad or something in the future down the road. That's the first immediate thing. Considering we've had a couple of issues starting today, I may have to ditch the 10-year-old Optima and buy a level 7 Motorsports battery box and one of their little lightweight batteries. They only weigh like 5 pounds.
Yeah.
So
the whole setup is what, 9 pounds?
yeah,
Like the box and the.
Oh yeah. So that would probably help me gain roughly 30-40 pounds. I would be ditching.
So you couple that with 100 pounds.
Yeah. So you're doing that, and then down the road, Jesse's hooked up, I believe he told me, with Fiber Forged, who started to make a lot of carbon fiber parts for C10s, whole cabs and stuff, I think, eventually. I don't want to go as far as hood and this and that and other to get into paint, and because my truck's not a full-blown race truck, but it is fun, good cruiser. But I may do stuff like carbon front bumper to cut some weight, maybe change the bumper brackets, and all together with everything down the road, that may be 150, 170 pounds, that I like to lose.
Yeah.
And because my truck's really heavy in comparison to most of the guys that I run with. With me, the truck's right at 4,000 pounds. A lot of the guys we run with, they range anywhere between 36 to 38 on average. A few of the guys from the West Coast we ran with last year, they were actually around 32, 10,
No kidding.
34, but they had no bed. One guy had aluminum bed. One guy had a fiberglass hood. I mean, they're full-blown race trucks.
Yeah, right.
You know, to each their own. We can drive this thing to church, go out on date night. I actually considered kind of like Jesse, maybe selling my chassis as a rolling chassis and maybe upgrading to independent rear or a chassis to get a more rigid frame.
Yeah.
You know, and this whole truck's been a progression, so that may be the next step 3, 4, 5 years down the road.
Sure.
Depending on where life's at that point.
Well, I know you got, you know, this truck is obviously, your intention is to kind of have it be a hybrid. You know, it's a race truck, it's a go to church, go to town kind of truck, you know, just a show truck even. You know, take it to a show, sit in the parking lot or put it in the field. But, you know, I think that it's really amazing what you've been able to do with this stock chassis. You know, taking just the stock frame rails and doing all the no limit stuff you've done to it and really making it what it is. It's just so cool.
It's been a blast, a good learning experience. You know, people ask me all the time, what do you got in the truck? Well, that's hard to say. If I could go back and know what I know now and have met Jesse and a few of my other more intelligent friends, I could have a lot less money in the truck. But due to just knowledge and where we live.
Trial and error. And, I mean, it's like, you know.
It's been one of those things that, you know, I burned up 2 automatics, ran great, but they were just short term. I'd get them too hot, burn them up, and then we upgraded to this Bowler 6-speed. Stuff like that, you know. Unless you're running a Rankin, Jericho, or just a built 4L80, the automatics, it's just hard for them to withstand the abuse of 6,000, 7,000 RPMs all the time.
Oh yeah.
So.
Well, I've enjoyed getting to know more about this truck and even more about you, man. So thanks for taking the time.
Appreciate it.
It's awesome.
Yes, sir.
Hear the music.